That will be Dr. Swapnil Rajpathak. Dr. Rajpathak, you have 5 minutes. Please start with your conflicts. And I will actually have to stop everybody at the 5 minutes, and you can see that the time is on the screen. Thank you for being with us here.
Thank you, and good morning and good afternoon. My name is Swapnil Rajpathak. In terms of my disclosure, I'm an employee of Merck and own company stocks. I'm a research scientist in the company. So first, Merck appreciates the opportunity to comment on ICER's assessment of sotatercept, an investigational medicine under review by US FDA for the treatment of adults with PAH. By way of brief introduction, sotatercept is an activin signaling inhibitor designed to target underlying vascular remodeling in PAH. In STELLAR, the 24-week phase 3 randomized double-blind trial, adults with PAH received either sotatercept or placebo on top of this stable background therapy. The results from the study were promising, as sotatercept demonstrated statistically significant improvement in its primary endpoint, a 6-minute walk distance, and 8 of the 9 secondary outcome measures, including the secondary outcome of time to death or first occurrence of a clinical worsening event. We would like to acknowledge the work of ICER, Midwest CEPAC, providers, patients, and their caregivers, and other stakeholders who have contributed to this assessment. We'd like to reference and reiterate feedback provided previously to ICER, either formally through ICER's written public comment period or informally via predetermined touch points built into the ICER assessment process. To begin, we would like to express our unwavering commitment to patients living with PAH and their families. PAH is a debilitating disease characterized by rapid and unpredictable progression with devastating impact on patients' quality of life, including severe functional limitations and adverse financial and emotional effects on both patients and their caregivers. Prognosis for these patients still remains poor, with the median survival estimated to be 5 to 7 years currently from the time of diagnosis, and patients would certainly benefit having additional treatment options. Now, in any clinical and economic modeling exercise, it is necessary to make a number of assumptions. However, there are numerous assumptions where we believe ICER's approach may not have appropriately reflected the experience of patients with PAH or of sotatercept. I will briefly highlight a few. I know these comments came up before as well. But these may limit the interpretation of this report. And again, these were communicated previously with ICER. In terms of the durability of effect, ICER's approach did not incorporate data beyond 24 weeks, which remains a critical gap in the overall assessment. Merck has taken important steps to better understand the durability of sotatercept beyond 24-week trial as part of long-term extension studies such as Arterial and Pulsar open label extension. The ICER's model structure did not adequately capture the full therapeutic value of sotatercept in patients with PAH. For example, using just the WHO functional class-based model, which relies exclusively on clinical judgment of patient-reported symptoms, perhaps a more holistic assessment should account for other measures of severity and prognosis, such as 6-minute walk distance and NT-proBNP. Further, the model did not allow for transition into non-adjacent states, as we discussed. A more holistic model that we developed, we found at least 1/3 of the patients skipped the adjacent states, and it could be a proxy for a strong therapeutic potential. In addition, the model did not incorporate the data on hospitalizations and reduction in prostacyclin analogs escalation or mortality in the assessment. Next, ICER's evaluation also should include some therapeutic options that are most relevant to aid stakeholder decision making. And one example is additional analysis comparing sotatercept with other oral PH drugs such as selexipag, which is commonly used on top of the combination regimen of ERA and PD5 inhibitors. And this would be important information for decision making. Lastly, ICER employed willingness of pay threshold that may not reflect society's true value to pay for interventions in orphan diseases that provide meaningful improvements for patients with debilitating diseases like PAH. if adopted into real-world practice, these findings could have a negative impact on the investment on research and development of therapies that save and improve lives in diseases with small patient populations. In summary, given these limitations, we believe that ICER model does not account the full value and impact of sotatercept on patients living with PAH and should be considered when interpreting this report. But thank you again for the opportunity to provide these comments today. Merck remains deeply committed to advancing research and development on behalf of patients living with PAH and their families.
Thank you, Dr. Rajbak, for being here and for your comments. I'm going to ask Dr. Whittington if she has any comments or responses. I know many of this has been already addressed in the previous discussion.
Yes, maybe two things. Thank you for your comments. First of which, just clarifying question about the effect after 24 weeks. We did continue to allow a slowing in the worsening in the base case. It just wasn't allowing an improvement in functional class after 24 weeks. So there still was a durability effect modeled on the slowing of the worsening. And then related to the hospitalizations, thank you for bringing this up because I didn't bring this up in my presentation, but we assumed hospitalizations were accounted for downstream of change in functional class. So how this was done is in the health state costs for each of the WHO functional class, the source we did use, the hospitalizations were greater as the severity of illness was greater. But then we understood that the utility might not be sensitive enough to pick up those difference in hospitalizations. And so we actually used literature estimated utility estimates for WHO functional class, and then added on to that an additional disutility based on the rate and length of stay of hospitalizations by WHO functional class. So we didn't track hospitalizations separately. That was included within our healthcare costs and then within our utility based on the adjustment we made.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Whittington. I'm going to ask Dr. David Rand if you have anything you want to add before we move to our next speaker.
Sure. I just wanted to comment on 2 points from those comments. One, the issue around selexipag came up as we were working along, and the statement was that selexipag is commonly used, but as you saw, selexipag is probably used in about 12% of patients. So displacing selexipag as a primary outcome would be a way of making the cost effectiveness look better, but it wouldn't reflect reality because, in fact, most patients are not getting selexipag. The other is around the issue of thresholds in small disease populations. We've seen that even in very small disease populations, these thresholds can lead to very high prices for therapies that have huge effects. If, however, we end up spending $400,000 a year, and we don't know that that's really what the cost is going to be of this drug, but something like that for each drug that comes along for pulmonary hypertension and for diseases like that affect 50,000 people, say, or 100,000 people, which gets called an orphan disease under FDA guidance, there's not going to be any money to do anything else. This is a very good drug, it looks like. Maybe it's a great drug. $36,000 a year is a lot of money for a drug that might add a couple of years of life. If manufacturers take the position that they need to make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year for drugs like this, there will be no money for anything else in our health system. Thanks.
Thank you, David. I'm going to move to our next speaker. Very important point for all of us to think about. So we now have Colleen Bernetti from the Pulmonary Hypertension Association Board of Trustees. Colleen, please go ahead, and you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Colleen Brunetti, and I've been a PH patient for almost 16 years. I want to start by thanking ICER for having us here today. While I can appreciate that your work must be methodical and data-driven, behind every number is a patient like me, impacted every day by PH and desperate for a better tomorrow. Anything we can do to move the needle forward has inherent value, and that is why I chose to be here today. After 16 years, my story is a long one. Suffice to say, my life was turned upside down by my diagnosis. I was only 28 and climbing fast in my career, having just bought a first home in which to raise my infant son. With the diagnosis of PH, everything stopped. I lost my job. We struggled for years to stay in that house. And worst of all, I feared that I would not live to see my son reach kindergarten. Through it all, I continue to hope for a cure, and in the meantime, strive to advocate for medical developments and healthcare policies that promise a better quality of life for patients while we wait. While I try to keep a positive spin, I know that the disease I have is always life-threatening, no matter my functional class. Never is this driven home more than when I lose a PH friend who seemed otherwise stable to sudden death, an experience I've had too many times. Or when a mother like me loses her life, leaving her children behind, literally the worst thing I can imagine. I've been really lucky to do relatively well during the course of my PH, but it certainly has not been without its struggle. I've tried to switch medications in the past only to end up in medical emergencies when they fail to work. I take an inhaled medication 4 times a day, a pill 3 times a day, another pill 1 time a day, manage an associated autoimmune condition with 2 more pills, sleep with oxygen and a CPAP, and battle fatigue and GI side effects. I've traveled to different states, even mid-pandemic, to participate in clinical trials, desperate for an easier way to manage all of this. I am tired, so tired. I've seen enough new medications hit the market that are maybe an incremental improvement, but still terribly difficult to manage or don't work for enough people. Honestly, I had stopped getting excited about new treatments. Until now. I look at the data on sotatercept, or even more impactful to me, talk to patients in the trials, and I have a renewed excitement and increased hope like never before. I'm a member of many private patient groups full of people who are waiting desperately for its release, and I am not saying that to be dramatic. Their sadness at the loss of friends, their abject fear of leaving their children behind, their anxiety about dozens of as yet unanswered questions on how much something like sotatercept might change the trajectory for us is palatable. I know science has to stick with data and companies have to stick with dollars, but for all of us waiting for progress, our hopes and dreams and lives still feel priceless. For a medication that shows such promise, the first thing I think of is how it might make my life better. Almost immediately, my stomach flips when I anticipate just how much trouble it might be to access, because I already know far too well the impact of these costly medications and how much of a fight I've had to put up in the past just to get them covered and paid for. As we know, sotatercept trials look at the medication as add-on therapy. Well, my therapies already roughly cost $250,000 a year. I see your placeholder price tag of $400,000 and I worry. Will insurance balk at the approval? Will it get left out of formularies? Will assistance be sufficient and readily available for patients? People look at the numbers of treatments we have for PH and think we are lucky. In many ways, compared to other rare diseases, they are right. But none has been enough yet. Don't get me wrong, I'm grateful for the treatment options we do have, but my friends are still dying. The side effects are still debilitating. I'm still struggling. It's not enough. As sotatercept is poised to enter the market, it underscores the need for the doctor and patient as a team to make informed decisions on treatment options, often a combination of treatment options. There has been so much progress and promise in sotatercept, and as such, it must be made accessible to everyone who wants to try it and has the informed medical opinion of their provider behind them, not the opinion of the insurance companies, as we see too often. I hope that your final report underscores just how much quality of life is impacted by PH and how the potential for physical improvement leads to quality of life improvement. I hope you can settle on a presentation of data and recommendations that takes the whole patient in mind and centers the patient and providers as drivers of shared decision-making, a factor that is more possible with an accessible price point and plan to support patients who can't financially access whatever price we do end up with. I want to leave you with what is now my ideal vision. We've benefited for years from a set of treatments that have worked, but still need more. I see sotatercept as sort of the start of a new era of PH treatments, a treatment with pivotal potential, further enhanced by other really exciting research in the field with other modalities. I see a future where PH patients enjoy a high quality of life, minimal disruptions from medication management and side effects, and less fear and uncertainty. Again, thank you for your time and detailed attention to PH and what we hope is a brighter future for patients everywhere. With that, I'll conclude my remarks.
Colleen, I cannot thank you enough for being here today and for sharing your story and for the courage. to speak up. Your words certainly touched me, and I'm sure touched everybody here in the audience. And as a mom, I can't not think about this disease affecting disproportionately young women. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay. With that, I'm going to ask to go to our next speaker. And our next speaker is also Colleen Connor this time, from a patient volunteer from the Pulmonary Hypertension Association. Colleen, please go ahead.
Thank you so much for having me today. Again, my name is Colleen Connor. I was diagnosed with pulmonary hypertension in 2007. I'm heading to a wedding after this. That's why I'm a little bit dressed up. But prior to my diagnosis, I had an amazing life. I was active. I was regularly skiing, biking, and running. I had a career that I thrived in. I enjoyed being a vice president of sales for a global 500 company. I had a sales target of 100 million and a whole line of business under me. And then after the birth of my second child, my daughter, I became short of breath. I was told I had asthma for over 2.5 years after seeking help. We determined I had severe pulmonary hypertension, and the trajectory of my delayed diagnosis resulted in advanced disease, which is very common for people with PH. PH has turned my world and my family's world upside down. By the time I was diagnosed, I needed oxygen 24/7. My children were only 3 and 7 years old. Thanks to a very highly accommodating employer, I was able to work for a few more years until a PH crisis prevented me from continuing. Leaving my work family and my community was incredibly difficult. Technically, I was a stay-at-home mom, but really, I was just trying to survive at home. Physically, I couldn't do much with my family. And while, of course, I couldn't participate in any physical games with my kids or pick them up, I was even prohibited from doing a basic thing like going on a children's class trip because you're not allowed to have oxygen on school buses. I needed to train my children about what it's like to do when they come home from school and mommy fell asleep somewhere weird, like on the kitchen floor or at the top of the stairs or in the hallway. During my rapid progression, my life was saved by an IV therapy, but even that tolerable therapy came with terrible side effects. I had neuropathy in my legs and I couldn't stand up for more than a few minutes. I was in the bathroom daily with GI issues, and these greatly limited me being outside the house. I knew the side effects were extreme, but my alternative was death. I need so much oxygen that I actually have to ration it because my insurance company will only allow me a certain number of tanks a month, and I deliberately need to keep my oxygen saturation low to accommodate my supply needs. I was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2018, and I mention this because I want you to know that once I began to recover from chemotherapy, my pulmonary hypertension became better. I went from using 4 to 6 liters of oxygen sitting to not using any at all. My doctors tested it, and because I was doing so well, my care team agreed to transition me to an inhaled therapy. Losing the IV line improved my life dramatically. No more ER trips, no more severe infections, no more IV line replacements. And I was doing really, really well on the inhaled therapy. But sadly, the further removed I become from breast cancer treatment, the worse I'm doing. Mentally, I'm hopeful because I know for a fact that I can be better and that there is a treatment out there that will work for me. But for now, I can't walk down the street without significant shortness of breath. I need really 15 liters of oxygen to do a 6-minute walk. And even trying to ration on 6 liters, my oxygen's in the 70s and 80s, and my heart rate is in the 130s and 140s. For the last 16 years, I've had tremendous physical and mental fatigue, and I've lost my independence. I've been looking forward to sotatercept since I heard about it. I know there are pathways that are working and that might be able to give me the opportunity to improve quickly like I did after having gone through chemotherapy. I am desperate for this new medication. I cannot easily go back onto IV as I'm out of options to put lines in my chest from all the right heart catheterizations and line replacements. And I'm scared. I can't catch my breath now more than ever. And I try to take it in stride as best as I can and remain upbeat for my family. But when your heart rate is very high and your oxygen is very low and you're not recovering, it is frightening. We need new treatments for PH. I'm a support group leader, and death and transplant are far too common in my support group. We all know transplant is trading one condition for another. We've lost far too many patients. My dream is to see my children mature, attend their weddings, dance at their weddings, and meet my grandchildren, and maybe, just maybe, do the things with my grandchildren that I was prohibited from doing with my own kids.
Pauline, thank you so much again for not only sharing the impact of PAH on you, but on your family. And despite all that you're going through, to actually be with us today and make sure that the voice of you and patients like you is heard. We heard you, and we really appreciate you being here. Thank you.
Thank you.
With that, I'm going to ask to move to the next speaker. And that's going to be Julia Feitner, a patient expert. Julia, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you for taking the time to be part of ICER's public meeting on sotatercept today. My name is Julia Feitner, and I've been diagnosed for 15 years now. According to statistics, you're going to develop alcohol and substance abuse issues, be in a gang, a delinquent, or have a teen pregnancy. That's what someone bluntly told me as I stood by my father's coffin at the age of 10. I fought with everything I had for that not to become true of me. And those same words flooded back into my mind in February of 2008. About an hour earlier or so, a doctor had stood over my bed and diagnosed me with pulmonary hypertension. He bluntly told me that my 34-week unborn son and I were both about to die because, not knowing I was sick, I had chosen to get pregnant. The next doctor who entered my room said that we needed to decide which life to save, mine or our child's, that it wasn't possible to save them both, and we had mere minutes to decide. And that bone-chilling curse from my childhood flooded my mind once again. Of course, I would choose to save my son, even though I knew the struggle he would have to overcome in a life without a parent. By God's great mercy, both of our lives were spared, and he is now a healthy 15-year-old. I've been asked to share my PH story with you today. I could tell you of the PTSD I suffered for years after having been intubated for what seemed like an eternity, cognizant of the fact that I was suffocating, but unable to communicate to my care team. I could tell you of the times I almost committed suicide because the pain was too intense, the uphill climb too impossible, and the struggle for each breath too exhausting, or of passing out from low oxygen and losing all bodily control. And then when I woke up, having to scrub the carpet on oxygen so my children wouldn't see it when they came home from school and be terrified to go back the next day and what would happen to me while they were gone. I could share the memories I missed out on with my children because my PH exhaustion is debilitating. The balls not thrown in the backyard, the snowman not built, the hills not sledded down, the events not attended because I didn't have the strength to climb the stairs or even just to get out of the car. Instead, I will focus on what I have learned. I have learned that numbers don't tell the whole story. Statistically, perhaps I shouldn't be emotionally healthy after my childhood, but I praise God that I am. Statistically, my son and I should both have died the very day I was diagnosed. We've lost count of the number of times a doctor has said I wouldn't survive the night. I've learned that since PH affects a person, you must look to the person, not just medical chart or cost analysis sheet when deciding how to proceed. Because I've learned how to survive and thrive with PH all these years, I have had the privilege to share what my husband and I learned along the way to make the meds more manageable with other patients and with the specialty pharmacies who train new patients. We've helped change standard of care that thousands others now experience. One can't put a price tag on that, but one can make medications cost prohibitive or fail to find ways to keep patients from falling through the insurance gaps. My husband works for a Fortune 100 company, and when he started earlier this year, we selected their best insurance. Our monthly copay for my 3 PH meds is $27,000 out of pocket. That's absurd. I've stayed alive these past 15 years because of expensive meds and expensive hospital stays. I sit here before you today because of sheer tenacity, medical research and excellent care, and the grace of God performing miracles in my heart and lungs. Medically, I've been very, very expensive. Today, you will be discussing recommendations regarding what will hopefully be a life-changing medication for thousands of PH patients who are just like me, desperate for one more breath. As you deliberate policy, I ask you to please keep our faces, mine and the other patients who so bravely shared their hopes and their pain with you today, at the forefront of your conversation. You see, I learned that I am more than a statistic, more than a dollar figure on a spreadsheet. I'm a mother who has lived to raise her sons to be healthy, contributing members of society. They have watched me pour life and love into everyone around me, no matter the reality of my day. My journey has taught them personal grit and compassion. This next generation will be better because of the pain we have experienced, as long as we choose to use it for good. Every life that is lengthened through medical advancements contributes toward the greater good of us all. The medical world says that sotatercept is potentially disease-modifying. As a patient who's been in the trial for 2 years, it has been course-altering, life-rejuvenating, and hope-restoring. If I had been able to have societal and generational impact while fighting PH and merely surviving on drugs that don't treat the actual disease process, what impact can there be on society as a whole if this many patients are given a fighting second chance of life? I pray we don't waste it and that we can afford the meds. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And again, thanks for all your contributions today. And I know you're staying with us through the second part. And thank you for all you're doing, not only to continue to go on, but for your community and society. We really appreciate it and appreciate you sharing your story with us. Thank you. Let's go to the next speaker. We have Katie Kroner, Vice President, Advocacy and President Engagement of Pulmonary Hypertension Association. Katie, please go ahead.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today, although you have already heard from the real experts in pulmonary hypertension, and those are, the folks who are really living with the disease. There's nothing that I can add to those personal stories, but we'll summarize a few key points that we've talked about today that are important from PHA's perspective. Again, Katie Kroner, Vice President of Advocacy and Patient Engagement at the Pulmonary Hypertension Association. PHA's mission is to extend and improve the lives of those affected by PH. And to achieve that, we really engage the entire PH community, including patients, families, healthcare professionals, and researchers. I'd really like to thank the ICER team for not only the opportunity to speak today, but for all of the time and attention that you've put into educating yourselves about pulmonary arterial hypertension over the past year. As we've heard again today, PAH is a complex, progressive, and life-threatening disease. FDA-approved treatments are available, and they've increased average life expectancy after diagnosis from less than 3 years to more than 7. However, PAH still places a tremendous physical and mental burden on patients and their loved ones. And as you've heard, we continue to lose too many people too soon. Finding and initiating appropriate therapy for PAH patients is urgent. Any treatment delay, including, again, as we've heard today, the very common misdiagnosis of more than a year, presents the potential for a patient to lose functionality that they may not be able to fully recover even after appropriate therapy is initiated. PHA recommends robust access to sotatercept for 2 primary reasons. First, the importance of PH treatment being driven by clinical judgment and the patient-clinician relationship. And second, the potential for sotatercept to offer a new paradigm in PH treatment, including the potential for disease modification, the unique disease pathway addressed by the drug, and the unique delivery mechanism. PAH is complex, and effective management requires an expert physician. Individuals with PAH respond differently to different therapies, both in terms of their clinical outcomes as well as side effect burden and quality of life measures. Any delay in placing patients on therapy options that are best for them, including delays created by step therapy requirements, can lead to irreversible decline and an overall increase in healthcare costs. Care must be driven by expert clinical judgment and the patient-clinician relationship, beginning with access to the full range of therapy options. Regarding the potential for disease modification, I was really glad that we had a chance to touch on data from the Pulsar open label extension and interim results from the Soteria open label extension, as we've discussed, showing multi-component improvement from PAH, even among patients who were considered stable on background therapy. So still improvement even on those previously stable patients. The data strongly suggests sustained benefit beyond 24 weeks and present the exciting possibility of simultaneously improving patients' quality of life and decreasing healthcare system costs. In addition, sotatercept addresses a novel disease pathway that may benefit patients for whom current therapy options are not working. And finally, PAH clinicians encounter patients who are unable to sustain adherence on current advanced therapy options due to housing instability, physical or cognitive limitations, lack of caregiver support, or other reasons. And so sotatercept's delivery mechanism is unique among PAH therapies and really has the potential to increase both adherence and quality of life for patients who struggle with existing advanced therapy options. Thank you again so much for your time.
Thank you, Katie. And again, thanks for being with us today throughout the day, reminding us of the advantages from mechanistic, but also delivery point of view. With that, I think we are going to go with our last but not least speaker today. We have a second Katie Tobias, patient advocate. Katie, please go ahead. I am not hearing Katie.
We can see you now, Katie. You're having a technical issue with the sound.
Sorry.
You are.
We hear you now.
Okay. Katie Tobias. I was diagnosed 17 years ago. Living with severe PH is like betting against a house in Vegas. Will I hit the jackpot, be able to get ready and meet friends for lunch? Or will I sink back down on the bed gasping for air because I dared to swap sweatpants for jeans? As they say in gambling, the house always wins. The same is true here. PH decides when you have an active day and when you're stuck on the couch. PH determines how long any given medication works before every breath becomes a struggle. By the time I was accurately diagnosed, I was knocking on death's door. Thankfully, an IV medication and 2 pills not only saved my life, but restored my quality of life for a while, until this brutal, relentless disease overpowered them. And once again, I was fighting for my life. It was time to shake up that drug cocktail, roll the dice, and try again. A different IV drug kept me stable, but didn't improve anything. It did cause agonizing head-to-toe body pain that never went away, despite being on narcotics around the clock for 3 years. I was an out-of-breath zombie in debilitating pain who tried most, if not all, narcotics available. The awful drug was replaced with a miraculous inhaled treatment. My heart and lungs were happy. I was finally enjoying life again, rather than barely surviving. The agonizing body pain was gone as soon as the IV drug was out of my system. So was the need for any pain medication. I was later blessed with a break from all machinery and thrived on a cocktail of 3 pills. It was amazing, liberating. It was short-lived. I'm back on that first IV drug, considered stable, but my quality of life has not improved in 3 years. I no longer respond to any other PH medication. The luxury of confidently filling my calendar is long gone. My life is now the epitome of the phrase, play it by ear. Breathing can be a struggle, despite using 5 liters of oxygen all the time. My energy level fluctuates, but most of the time I'm just running on fumes. I often feel like a shell of my former self physically. Yes, I could stay at this level for a long time. I try so hard to stay in the moment, to focus on living, not just for myself, but for my parents, my sister, my family and friends. They are my reason for breathing. However, the terrifying truth is I may collapse in death's front yard with very little warning. I've seen it happen so many times to so many people, and I have no other treatment options. I started the evaluation process for a double lung transplant as a precaution, but that's just trading one battle for another. As we fight for our own lives, we must honor those who have gone before us, the Facebook friends who became our chosen family. I've loved and lost some of the best people because of this disease. We all have. I can't help wondering, what if they had access to this new treatment? What would the world look like if our angels were standing with us today, still living, still breathing? As much as I miss and love my friends, I am not ready to join them anytime soon. This is the reason we need access to state-of-the-art medication. This is why innovative research must continue. Our lives depend on it. Hope is a beautiful thing, but for me, it's always been more about courage and strength to get through each day, striving to enjoy the time I've been given, to make a difference, to love and be loved. But thanks to exciting treatment options on the horizon, realistic options like sotatercept, I have hope. Maybe for the first time in 17 years.
Edie, thank you so much again for sharing your story, for making sure that we're all hearing not only your voice, but the voice of those who you care about in your community, and reminding us of what does this new treatment giving to the community, hope and courage, which we really appreciate. Again, thank you all to all our speakers today. We all heard you. We really did, and we appreciate you being here. With that, I think we are going to move next to a break, and I'll give it to Steve. I think we come back 12:50. Steve, anything you want to say?
Just to echo the splendid public comments and the insights that, as Katie mentioned, one of the Katies have guided us and the team for almost a year. Thank you for bringing that into the public meeting so that others could hear it and we could hear further. So I would like to give everybody a full 45 minutes. I think we can manage the voting and the discussion such that we can come back 5 minutes later, a big 5 minutes. So we can come back at 5 minutes before the hour, so 5 minutes before 1 Central, and we will convene at that point again to talk through the evidence and have votes prior to the policy roundtable. So we'll see you at 5 minutes before the hour. Thanks, everybody.